Hello everyone, it's Eric here, and in today's video, I'm going to be doing a little review of Vallejo Game Color. So this is the new updated formula for the Game Color range, and I'm really happy to see that they have updated the packaging and the formula, and just because the old formula was getting really old, and it was pretty much a pure ripoff of the old GW line, and it's really nice to see some new life into this range. And I think it's a really nice range. It has a really nice set of colors. It's not too many. It's not too few. It is a bit on the smaller side. I think there's about 80 colors. I have all of them, so I thought I'd do a review on them. So I think there's only one other person who's reviewed these paints, which I think is kind of weird. There's only like Stolly and Angel 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 Heraldez. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. So I don't see a lot of other people using or talking about these paints. And I think they're nice paints, so I'm going to be reviewing them. So first thing to go over is just the bottle. I think the bottle is, like I said before, a lot nicer. It's made out of a different material, and it has 18 milliliters so as opposed to 17. It has a really nice picture of some character on the front, and just the logo is sharper. It's more modern, crisper. Yeah, I just really like the packaging. It really does make me excited to paint just this little character on top or on front. So I'll give it a good shake. So the first thing you'll notice when opening these paints is that, and putting them on your wet palette, is just the way you can really just gently squeeze them and get a tiny little bit of paint on your palette. You see, just like that. Whereas like I noticed a lot of other brands, like the bottles are really harder or firmer, so you have to push a certain amount of pressure, and then it's really hard to get just a tiny amount like this, and you can just push a little more to get more paint. So it has a really nice squeezability factor that I don't think any other paint range has in their bottles. So I'm going to be demonstrating this paint on this little Beastman shield that I did for a previous video. We're going to be looking at coverage, consistency, flow, things like that. I probably could have shaken this up a bit more, but it should work. So far the coverage it's okay. I need a second coat, but that's to be expected with these things. I mean, I will acknowledge one complaint that most people seem to have with these paints, and it's bubbles. I will agree that I've definitely seen some bubbles, but I find that you only get bubbles generally when the paint kind of pools in recesses. So if you're kind of a bit more careful in your application and don't let it pool anywhere, you shouldn't get bubbles, but other people's mileage may vary. All right, well, that's drying. I'm going to move on to a different color. Let's try Anthea Skin. When you first open a new bottle, it has a little security seal, so it's a little, you have to apply a bit more force to open it at first, but then it acts as you'd expect. So, and just another thing with these bottles, it's just, I can't tell you how satisfying it is just to gently squeeze the bottle and get just a tiny little bit of paint out. You have so much control over how much paint you let out in with these bottles, which you don't really have with any other bottle. Yeah, the coverage on this color is really nice. Okay, going back to the wood, I'm going to give it a second coat. I kind of saw some bubbles forming, so I popped them. I feel like with these paints, you kind of have to be wary of bubbles, so just try to make sure you don't get any pooling, and you shouldn't get too many bubbles. But I mean, overall, I mean, even if you do get a bubble, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a big deal. Once it's all said and done, probably not even going to notice it with everything else in place. And if it does bother you, generally, if I want to get rid of like the residue of bubble, I get like some kind of toothpick or a thumbnail and just kind of scrape it away. Usually the bubbles are so fine and thin that you can usually scrape them away and it looks fine. All right, let's move on to bone white. Let's see how a lighter color fares with these new paints. And I know these aren't super new, but I'm a little late to the party with this review, but I thought I'd share my 2 cents as someone who's been painting for a while. So far, coverage is pretty good. Definitely solid. Definitely need to avoid those bubbles. That's like the only issue with this paint is its kind of propensity to make a few bubbles. But if you can live with that or learn to apply it carefully and avoid it, then these are really nice paints. I've been using them for a little while. Yeah, solid coverage, just solid selection of colors. Nice packaging, really nice dropper bottles. Certainly an improvement over the previous ones. I feel like the coverage is just way better than the previous edition of this paint. Black. All right, let's see what this black can do. All right, let's give the bone another coat. Yeah, this is probably going to take a third coat. All right, so I have all the base coats down, and I feel like it's been a pretty pleasant experience. It's the only issue, like I said before, is that some bubbles popped up, so I tried to scrape some away, but overall looking good. And I feel like the drying time might be a little long on some colors, but overall, it's nice. So, all right, next we're going to try a wash. Now, this isn't the express color, this is just a regular wash. This is an umber wash. I feel like they didn't really go all out on the washes part of the new Vallejo Game Color. I feel like they put that energy into the express line because I feel like there's not even a green for the washes. So I'll try an umber all over. And, as you can see, it's totally a functional wash. Although in my previous experience with these paints, I found that the wash has the same issues as the regular paint in that if you let it pool, it can lead to bubbles. So you just have to be careful not to let it pool too heavily on any area, which is a little unfortunate, but I feel like, with the GW washes and contrast, they're a bit more foolproof in that regard, in that I've never really seen washes give you bubbles, or very, very rarely. As with these, if you let it pool, it's almost rest assured you're going to get bubbles. So there's something to be aware of. All right, let's just sop up some of the pooling. So hopefully this doesn't give me too much or any kind of bubbles, but we'll see. I'll be right back when it dries. All right, and I'm back. And it's probably not fully dry, but I want to just see what it looks like if I put some more layers on it. So now I'm reapplying the base coats. So it's layering up nicely. So I'm going to retouch up that wood. Okay, now I'm going to be touching up the skin. So I think it's interesting that this, I don't know if this wash maybe is still wet, or it appears to have dried incredibly glossy in the recesses. So that's not great, but we can always just mat it down with some varnish afterwards. All right, I'm just going to apply some highlights to the wood. All right, that's looking good. Next, I'm going to mix a little bit of the bone color with the flesh color. Just gonna paint some fine lines for highlights. So I'm going to just paint some of this black paint, thin it down a lot, and just paint it into the deepest recesses of the eye sockets and the like, because I feel like it's not getting quite enough shading. So very carefully, I'm just gonna take some of this black paint and just kind of brush it in there. And if you make a few mistakes, it's totally fine. You can always come back later and clean it up. Or at least I will be. And I think I'll put some of this in between some of the wood grain. Just so there can be a little priority in the shading. Came out a little strong in some areas, but I think overall it's pretty good. Now I'm just going to take some of this pure bone color and I'm going to highlight the skin. Then I'm going to paint some of the very finest edges of the wood. There we go. Maybe just modulate that a little bit. Okay, next I'm just going to mix some of this bone color with this black, and I'm going to highlight the hair. It came out a little strong, so I think I might just glaze it back. Okay, there we go. I think that's looking pretty good. So this has gotten into a bit more of just like a painting session than just a pure product review. So, overall, I think these paints are really nice. A beautiful paint bottle, and the way you can just squeeze out a tiny little bit on the brush. But again, the only issue I find with this paint line is the bubbles. If it weren't for the bubbles, this paint line would be just A++. But with the bubbles, it does kind of take it down a little bit because you just kind of always have to be mindful of your application and really trying not to let it pool in the recesses. So, but I mean, overall, I feel like I've kind of finished this piece and I don't really notice any bubbles. I suppose they're there if you're really looking for them, but like I said before, when it's all said and done, usually tiny little flaws like that don't really show up when you have all the contrast and the variety and the interesting kind of paint on the model. So this has been my my little review of the Vallejo Game Color. I think it's a great line. I think they're very affordable, and I would totally recommend checking them out if you can tolerate a few bubbles here and there, maybe. So this has been Eric. If you like my content, please consider liking and subscribing, and you want to support the channel, check out some of my affiliate links. I hope you have a great day. Let me know if you have any comments or questions below. Take care. Bye-bye.